atas semua bantuannya untuk sampai Prof Beng Lan sampai di FIB, karena beliau juga adalah adjunct profesor dari Fakultas Ilmu Pengetahuan Budaya. So maybe we can start the lecture. Yes.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. If you don't want to hold the mic, you can also use that. It's already on.
Oh, so I think it's better lah, because it's easier for me.
Yeah.
So everyone can hear me. So hello, selamat siang. Saya Prof Beng Lan. You can call me Ibu Beng Lan. Yeah. So it's a small crowd, very nice and friendly. First, I'm very thankful to be here. I'm very happy to be here, that people are interested in Southeast Asian studies, because it's not everywhere that people are interested. We will talk about this, the questions about Southeast Asian studies. I want to thank the Dean, Pak G, and Pak Manager, Vice Dean, and Ibu Melanie, Ibu Ira, and the Department of Area Studies for inviting me here. I've been to Indonesia many times. I many friends here, so I'm very happy to be here. And today, I'm very happy to meet the students of the Master's program in Southeast Asian Studies in Singapore, the Department of Southeast Asian Studies, where I was for 20 years and was head for 6 years, and deputy head for 4 years. So it was a long time. So I was very involved and very much also in the Master's program, which we had a very strong program. Until recent times, we have funding problems and all that. So it's very good to see interest. Yeah. So today I will go to my lecture, which is I do not, I come without really knowing where you're coming from, your history of the department, or that, because I have very little time to discuss with Pak Menka and the Dean and Ibu Melanie. So I come with certain assumptions, and I have done a lecture which I think hopefully will appeal and will be of relevance to your interest, but we can have questions and answers. And I will speak in English, but I can also speak in Bahasa Melayu or campur Bahasa Indonesia, trying to be Indonesian. But we can also discuss in Bahasa Indonesia. I can understand. So right. So if you don't understand anything in the middle of my talk, just raise your hands and you can. Yeah. So the talk is the lecture's topic is Mapping the Future of Southeast Asian Studies. So, and the lecture content, I believe I have 5. We will look at a little bit only on the origins of area studies, crisis and revisionism within Southeast Asia, within Asia and Southeast Asia itself. And then we talk about future directions, what are the roles for students of the region, and the conclusion. Okay? I can pass the slide to your school, so no problem. Okay? So don't worry about copying. You can take notes, no problem. Okay? I know students always trying to copy. Yeah. So listen, and then you can get the slides, no problem. So let's look at, where area studies, right? I'm not sure whether all our students in Singapore, by the time they become honors, then only they know where is area studies, because is the way we have the curriculum is also confusing, because area studies is not really a discipline in a way. So, but if you look at area studies, it is actually in contemporary times when we look at area studies, it's usually in between the humanities and the social sciences. In Singapore, we have faculty arts and social sciences. We have in the faculty 3 divisions, so humanities and social science, and in the middle is called what we call Asian studies, and Asian studies are all the area studies. So in a way, area studies is in between. How does it come about? Well, I will start with this. I will not be doing this for our methodology. I will be talking about its relationship, history with humanities and social sciences. Today we look at the bigger picture very briefly, the origins. If you look at Southeast Asian studies as a field of area studies, in today's time, it really has a Western origin. It does not mean that there are no other origins, okay? But the notion, and I think if you're honest, we have to say, because some people argue, no. I have colleagues in Singapore who say Malay studies is not Western origins, but I don't think so. I think that the notion of area studies, the concept of area studies in its modern understanding, in institutional understanding, is very much a product of the Western notion or Western concept of area studies, and in particular with area studies, it is a product of the Cold War in North America, right? Now, area studies was, and this means French area studies, I suppose, of the French, because Europe also was part of the rebuilding, but in particular, not so much the Western area. It's very much the non-Western regions, because during the Cold War, after World War II, the fear was that these non-Western countries will fall into the hands of the socialist bloc. China, you have Chinese students here, so you're very much involved, you're the other side. So this American perspective, yeah? So they're afraid, yes, so they're afraid, Vietnam already is become socialist, so they're very afraid the domino theory, it will fall, all Southeast Asia will become red, right? So it's that Cold War. But actually, Cold War in the non-Western regions, like in Southeast Asia, in Africa, Latin America, it's not cold. It's a hot war, because people die. So you see the concept is, the words are very different. They say Cold War because to the Europe, to America, it's an ideological war. So we often think of spy stories, in Dresden or whatever. But actually, Cold War to many of the non-Western countries is very hot. And the Taliban, the Afghanistan, all this is part of the Cold War, right? Very, very violent and, destruction. But area studies was established in that context of trying to understand, to prevent non-Western regions, these developing countries, to fall into the hands of the socialist bloc in the ideological warfare between the free bloc or the capitalist bloc represented by America after World War II, and of course Russia and China, right? So it very much has that origins, okay? Now, of course, it's not the origin, it didn't start from there, the study of the non-West. It had an earlier European origins, and that what we would call Oriental studies, the study of the Orient. That's why Edward Said talks about Orientalism, right? So and the study of the non-West had a very long history already in Western Europe, right? And one can trace it even to, I would think, the Greek and Roman eras, because then they already imagined what the non-West would be like. Whether it's a man, the man of India is a man with a dog head, right? It's like us imagining aliens. Today we haven't gone to the outer space, so we think, we have aliens, like, we had all the Hollywood movies of aliens having all kinds of. So in those days when they haven't gone to the non-West, they also have this kind of imagination. So actually the antecedent of area studies is in the Oriental studies, and it has Western Europe. Western Europe, then before, after World War, it went to North America, largely America, US, right? Okay, so it has that origin, right? And early on, area studies in Western Europe, Oriental studies, is largely humanities, because it was the humanities were the earlier discipline, right? The Greek philosophy, Aristotle's, and all these, Roman thought and all that, were largely humanities, because social science only came on later, after the age of enlightenment, age of reason, and it was always social science was trying to emulate the sciences, to be like the natural sciences, that you can have objective methodology, you can build universal principles. It was during Industrial Revolution, when societies were urbanizing in Western Europe, and people were having the need to understand societal change, so they tried to emulate natural sciences. So area studies really early on was really humanities. Many of you are in area study in literature, in language, so area studies has their origins in humanities, right? And then it was, Oriental studies. And area studies, when it was set up after World War II, was very much typified by the addition, using social sciences to enhance and make the humanities stronger. So humanities are always seen as soft, right? This is some of the politics of discipline. You're fluffy, just words, and cultural studies. I have the same problem in my department in Singapore. They fight, oh, you're all fluffy people, not hard social science, whereas the political science, the economists all want to have hard methodology, right? So they have the same, but area studies in the World War II, in the American concoction, was very much where they bring in social sciences to enhance and to sort of give the humanities something more solid, right? Objective and clearer methodology, objectivity, trying to build universal theories, right? That's the origins, right? So now, and And this model, which is a combination where social sciences were brought in to enhance the, so it's actually between. That's why humanities, social science, area studies. So area studies is a package. It's like rojak, because it tries to bring everything together. It's a marriage, right, of different humanities and social sciences. So it's a marriage that I think never worked happily, because in American experience, they often have this, also area studies people, all kinds of background in a department. You have anthropologists, political scientists, cultural studies, linguists, and everybody together, right? So you're supposed to live happily and come up with a kind of interdisciplinary method, or it was initially it's called multidisciplinary, then it's not good enough because either you come together, you never talk to each other, right? Or actually the idea is, can you come together and come up with some discipline? These are issues we talk about in methodology, right? So how do you live together with all kinds of different historians, political science, economists, how to mix together? Now that's the challenge. It's a problem, but I also think it can be new opportunities. There are no easy answers, but we will think about how you forge forward with what can be an area studies kind of a method or a person. If you're from area studies, when you study a phenomenon, maybe your approach will be different from someone from economics department or sociology department. I think it should be different, right? And these are issues later on in the methodology class we can talk about, right? But this model in which the social sciences were brought in to complement the humanities, right, in the study of non-Western region, it became known as this area studies, and it's not only in North America, it also became a worldwide phenomenon, a worldwide spread, because of course, you know, the reality is northern, you know, is Euro-American knowledge is dominant, right? Since the age of enlightenment, I think it is the kind of when we study, you know, social sciences, humanities, we are studying very much, you know, a product, you know, of Western assumptions, right? So, right. So that is area studies' origins. Now, given that origins, so this is only one version, the Euro-American kind of concoction, which is become seen as a universal model. Now, if you look at this idea of area studies, you look at Southeast Asian studies, because it is from a Western or Euro-American perspective, the classical perspective of area studies, if you look at all the old books, is always looking at Southeast Asia. So why Southeast Asia? Where does it come from? Why Southeast Asia? South of where? Dari mana? Selatan dari mana? Selatan negara apa? Selatan negara our international students. Southeast Asia is south of China. Yeah. East of? Yes, east of India. So you can see it's derivative. So actually, I understood this when I went to New York for my postdoc, and after my PhD, very young in those days, I went, and whenever I talk to people from Southeast Asia, these New York people are already very cosmopolitan, but they cannot imagine where is Southeast Asia. They must go through certain maps, you know, they say, South, then they first have to go through Middle East, North, then India, then China, then they discover where I am. So it's very interesting because this is a product of knowledge. This is the product of what we call, what Foucault, what Edward Said will call you know, or what Foucault will call discourse knowledge and archive of knowledge. How knowledge is mapped, encyclopedic knowledge. But we, whether we like it or not, insidiously, unconsciously, we follow. So the mapping of Asian regions always has to be mapped through. They cannot imagine. That's why Southeast Asia always seen as tribal. They are not civilizational. The people who are ada kebudayaan adalah orang Cina, orang India ataupun orang Jepang. Tapi kalau Southeast Asia kita dipanggilnya tribal. So there's a hierarchy to knowledge, civilizational versus kind of tribal. So this package. So this has like the classical knowledge of Southeast Asia. Is understood in terms of derivative of the great Eastern tradition, right, of China, of India, of Japan, in a way. And so the schools of thought that have defined Southeast Asian studies classically is understood as derivative, is influenced by either Indonesian, Hinduism, and Sinicization, Chinese culture, all part of the, of course, the Malayo-Polynesian world, right? The Malay and the Polynesian world. Have you heard of the Kontiki adventure? If not, you can go and Google. There's a film on it as well, right? It's from Oceania, right? And then, and of course, it's also part of the Muslim world because the spread of Islam through Persia down to South Asia and then to Southeast Asia, right? So that's why it's always seen as Southeast Asia. We have no kind of core, no origins, and then so everything is derived. And this kind of knowledge has also mapped and shaped Southeast Asian studies because Southeast Asian studies always worried about what is our original origins, our purity, what is Southeast Asian, rather than influence from outside. So this has framed the kind of debate, but I'm not looking at the debate today. So we look at then, so Southeast Asia has the origins, right? And the map of Southeast Asia as a Cold War product. Why Southeast Asia? South of China, east of India is include everyone, right? Can include Sri Lanka also, right? But Sri Lanka is not included in Southeast Asia, right? And then East Timor, right? East Timor, is it part or not, right? So actually the map of Southeast Asia was formed during the World War II, the Allied Command, the America and Britain, then they defined what Southeast Asia is in the fight, of course, against Japan at that time. So that map has now become the universal notion of Southeast Asia. In between it, people, there are, of course, it's always, and this has become the map, the region, the boundaries of Southeast Asian studies has been defined by largely this map to the Allied Command. But of course, these are debates. Is Southeast Asia a region? Can you fix it? Is Sri Lanka not? How can you, when you draw divide, even Madagascar, even South Africa, the Malay influence goes there, so why is it in Southeast Asia? These are all questions, which are good questions, right? Because anyway, any kind of construct, any kind of delineation of a map of a region is always artificial. It is political, right? But even though it's artificial, it does not mean that it does not make sense. So on one hand, there are problems with being a very fixed notion of Southeast Asia. It's true, if you fix it, this is Southeast Asia, then what about Southeast Asians who go to America now? Yeah? Who goes to Japan? So, you know what I mean? So there are all these questions of boundedness can be a problem. But at the same time, the sense of being Southeast Asian, when the Southeast Asian people meet anywhere in any big conference or you have meetings, Southeast Asian people can talk to each other. Maybe except who? Mungkin orang Vietnam, maybe they are a bit more Chinese, but the Southeast Asians can relate to each other because we share many similarities in food, in language, right? So there are certain historical experiences, and I would also think some structural, linguistic, cultural processes that we share. So there are deeper, it's like if you want to draw something, there are deeper skeletons or deeper connections that connect this region. So there's a sense, because if you say, oh, Caribbean, there's also a Caribbean culture, right? You cannot deny that, right? There's ASEAN also, right? The ASEAN is also a political organization, but nevertheless there is SEA Games, right? So in that sense, this kind of institution also sometimes can create the notion that we are Southeast Asian, right? When I was younger, there's ASEAN. Now you have this, I don't know, Indonesian Idol or whatever. But dulu, kalau tahun 70-an, 80-an itu ASEAN, apa panggil? Forgot already. The ASEAN. I was young and very excited. I always watch, who is the best singer in ASEAN, that one. So it's like an American Idol or whatever idol now. So there is a sense of an ASEAN or a Southeast Asian belonging or identity. You cannot also deny that, right? So there are, so always think with more like have a perspective that's not so rigid, that's multi-dimensional. Be ready to see that this can be it, but it can be problematic, but does not mean that it's completely useless, right? So this kind of perspective, right? So now, as we all know, I think we all know already, Southeast Area Studies underwent pretty a crisis or a severe critique after so-called, if it was formed in the Cold War for ideological purposes. Of course, with the end of the Cold War, marked by the fall of the Berlin Wall in around 89, you know, so when there's no more Cold War, supposedly, there's no need to then, you know, why do you need then to study regions to prevent them falling from, you know, influence of the grips of communism, for instance, but even Russia has broken up. China has opened up, right? Vietnam has innovation, you know, economic innovation, renovation, and all that. So supposedly now we are a free or a triumph or what they say, global capitalist, whatever it is, yeah. But with this fall, so-called the end of the ideological war, of course, area studies, which was formed very much part for that purpose, underwent a crisis. You know, so in the initial days, in the 1990s, I think, you know, that in America, this crisis began in America. Remember, ideological war was very much American or centered kind of American perspective, and so many area studies then in the US lost funding. The area studies in the US are largely not department, you know, they can be masters, but usually in America they are, except in some cases they have master's program, but they don't have undergraduate, and they are largely research centers, right? And students can be there, but they belong to some other department, geography, anthropology, whatever. But it's quite different in Southeast Asia or in Asia, right? But they lost funding, so when they lost the funding, also then of course, you know, there's also a problem of continuing. And of course, the other big challenge as scholars, you know, when we think about, you know, we work about knowledge and all that. So, of course, the crisis was very much the challenge from the critique of Orientalism, which you all know. Have you all know about Edward Said's and critique of or the theory of Orientalism? How, you know, the Orient, the concept of the Orient is very much a concept produced by the interests of the West. For, you know, so it's very much a construct by the West. You know, whether it is as a romantic Orient or as a fearful, barbaric Orient or whatever, it can be love and hate. But nevertheless, this is a construct, and therefore, Said criticizes it and critique it and say that, you know, then we should try to find what real Orient is, not just those defined by the West, right? Now, so this critique has affected the humanities and social sciences very strongly, particularly fields that study the non-West. And of course, area studies is affected mostly because area studies is meant for the study of non-West, except people like French studies, maybe you know, they're studying France or Europe or whatever, right? So area studies and also anthropology, which is my major really suffered a critique and suffered, you know, oh, so if we are not legitimate, if we are Orientalists, then how? You know, should we close up shop and should we continue and all that, right? So this crisis, of course, led to a critique. It became global spread. It was a crisis in the US, but it spread globally, and very much it led to attempts to revise Southeast Asian studies and all area studies, whether whatever areas, studies, Latin American studies, and so on. And there are many directions, and the directions keep spreading and keep changing even today, right? So these directions are revisions of area studies, of Southeast Asian studies. I think that it happens especially in Asia. It falls under, you know, many efforts of trying to revise the study of region, and this has, I think people call it many names. It can be Asian studies in Asia. So you have Asian studies in the West, but there's to change it or to signify how it's different from the West, you have Asian studies in Asia. Then you also have, of course, a very influential program, which I think is quite strong here too, is the Inter-Asia Cultural Studies program. Cultural Studies is also, you know, very much in the critique of Orientalism, in the critique of the humanities, social sciences. Even in the West, there's in England, Birmingham School, you know, Stuart Hall, and in America also they have their own cultural studies. And so cultural studies, but in the revision, how cultural studies also become the study of Asia, very much is forwarded or promoted by the Inter-Asia Cultural Studies movement, right? And I think more recently, the One Road, One Belt, which is, of course, from funding from China, is also encouraging a lot of the study of the region Asia, but it's also very interesting because One Road, One Belt is not just Asia, it links also to the West as well, and Europe as well. So, and so these are interesting, I think, developments, right? So next, let's look at then revision within revisionism within Asia. And this, here I focus only on the inter-Asia discourses. So inter-Asia studies, I think it's, I focus on it because I think there are some very useful, very, I think they make some really big progress, and they make what we call watersheds, new watersheds in thinking, yeah, in thinking about the region, right? And so we should pay attention to what they say because we can learn from them. Doesn't mean all that they say are not problematic, but we can always learn. That's how knowledge is progress. We take, not everything will always be perfect because everything we take will always be problematic. It will never fit properly, you know. But it does not mean we don't use it because we see what we can learn from it. And so I think inter-Asia studies or inter-Asia discourses, I call it, you can call it anything, ideas, discourses, debates, yeah. And there's this, it has become quite influential because I think people find that it's quite attractive. That is to think Asia, to rethink Asia, without trying, the end is to how can we think of Asia without being influenced by Orientalist knowledge, by the West, or by even local elite, local dominant knowledge, especially nationalist definition. Because all of us know in all our countries, our governments are very strong and always want to tell us who we are. We Malaysian are like this, Singaporean like this, Indonesian are like this. Maybe Indonesia are more Broadway now, you're more scattered and you have more debates, more voices. So it's a very interesting development actually. So how can you think of Asian societies, yeah, without being over-determined by Western knowledge or by colonial, you know, or by national imagination? So this is the aim, to understand Asia in and on its own terms. And in inter-Asia discourse, they have what is called inter-referencing. Now, what is inter-referencing? I think it's not as clear, but I try to understand it, right? It is not comparative, like before we compare. Because when you have comparative study, it's always, the problem is when you measure, you always still have one yardstick to measure. And this one fit or don't fit, 1 inch longer, 2 inch shorter, or whatever, right? So there's a yardstick. But I think inter-referencing tries not to be like that. But actually how to articulate its difference is a bit hard. So I think what it does is it argues that instead of just, when we, for instance, class, we always, what is class notion? We always use class as, how do we define class? We are always at perplexed, right? Is it a capitalist product? Is it by economic relations only, or by more than that? What about you know, legacies, feudal names and all that? No, we also determine class. So how do we define it? Now, I think inter-Asia referencing it, but when we define, say, a concept, we often use, I think, very universal norms like class. Class itself very much a Marxist concept, right? We cannot escape from it. So they are trying to give one way where we can escape from all baggages and try to come up with new ideas. So they say, okay, let's compare. Even there's a concept, right, of class, let's compare how class is unfold, how class manifests itself in Asian countries. So instead of us comparing with the dominant Marxian category of class, let us look at Asia, how class unfolds in different countries, and the way it unfolds, it manifests itself, the terms that it is called, right, how class is called in different societies. Maybe from that, we can come up with some way to understand a new concept, a new content of this concept, right? I think inter-Asia has this intent. And the inter-referencing really has this, it's about using comparisons or elaborations, right, in Asia, how a similar phenomenon unfolds differently across different times, but has connection as well, and what are the meanings, what are the concepts used. Maybe we study them, compare, and you know, inter-reference with each other. Maybe we can come up with new idea and new understanding of class, for instance, or code, you know, whatever, or religion, whatever. Okay? So it's a way to kind of prevent us from being too obsessed with Western knowledge or Western canons of knowledge, and trying to come up, maybe we can come up with alternative ideas. Okay? So in this and it is really to decenter Western knowledge, colonial knowledge, and also not just that, also nationalist knowledge. also kind of very strong, dominant ideas, within Asia. It tries to kind of really uncover the subaltern, we call it in the post-colonial language, the everyday, right? Because, as scholars, all of us claim to be good people. We all want to understand the people without power. Because very few want to say, I want to understand the people with power, or I want to, but maybe also we have to understand why the people with power work in a way. But in a way, we always try. I think it's good politics because it's good to think about, and this is our role, to think about people without, whose voices are not heard, and try to articulate it, right? And of course, there are issues in it, but I think it is a good perspective, right? To have as scholars your responsibility, right? Knowledge is not just for your own sake, your own name, or your own ambition. You can have ambition, but I think it has also to have a good purpose, right? And so these inter-Asia studies have yielded or produced all quite interesting claims that there are alternative Asian realities, and there are alternative Asian concepts, and that there are alternative Asian logics. The Asian logic is not necessarily the kind of binary opposite, because I think Western logic is true. The Cartesian knowledge is always about, yes, the black or white, although of course they try to find the middle ground, but you cannot, everything is still, it's like A is not B, you know what I mean? So, but I think and this is hard to articulate, how do you define things that are contradictory and yet they're the same? Can we? I think can, right? And this one we need to understand and dig into our philosophy, our traditions to understand, and then, so this is what they're trying to say, right? That if you're opposite, if you're very different, you do not, but it's true. Men and, one just example for me how to understand the yin and yang. It's not cut into half. You cannot cut yin and yang because every yin there's yang. Then how to understand this? So it's fluid, right? So you need another logic. It's not that there's no opposition, but the opposition is understood in very different terms. And actually in science, in medical sciences, there are ways to understand it. So some scholars have turned to medical science to express this, right? Things that are different, but then they move, and they move back to something similar, but the similar line is different. Those kind of, it's actually different ways to express different logics, right? Logics to understand different ways of seeing things. And I think this is quite important because today we understand difference in that sense. We versus you. Islam versus Christianity. Malaysia versus Indonesian. Even with the Asap, also we fight. Where's the Asap from? You know what I mean? That those kind of very silly dichotomies we all have, right? Because it's so much, very much part of modern thinking. Can there be other ways? Huh? And I think I'm not a lecturer on inter-Asia studies, so I can't go into detail, but I find it interesting because I think it has found certain ways to express these differences, these alternative logics, and it goes back to a lot of Asian tradition, right? To express these differences. And I in the next one, this one again, sorry. Right, so next one. So then we go to revision. What about within Southeast Asia? There are also many, in Southeast Asia, and within Southeast Asia, there have also been many, many efforts to revise. I cannot even, it's so countless because I think every effort to rethink is seen as a revision, right? And I think one thing I think there are two aspects of it that is in Southeast Asian studies and in Southeast Asia. It has very different, although we inherit the kind of area studies concept, but I think the manifestation, the way it is run, is very different. Institutionally, so there are institutional, organizational differences, and there are also, of course, inevitably knowledge of theoretical differences. So I call it in my book that I have a volume where many people contribute. It is about trying to map Southeast Asian studies through different generations and practices of humanities and social sciences over time. And you see just institutionally, as area studies is dying or in crisis in the US and in Western Europe in the 1990s, compared to a crisis in Southeast Asia, it was flourishing. Everywhere popping up, every university, every country wants to have Southeast Asian studies, right? So if you just look at, here I have a very brief timeline of the countries that have this, right? And now you can add, UE also have a master's in Southeast Asian Studies 3 years ago, so that can be added. Somebody can do this. This is just a very brief timeline, not well researched. But you can see from 1976 and then 1991, and there are many other countries that have set up, right? So in many ways, ours are late beginnings. We were flourishing at a time of crisis. Now, late beginnings also mean that our assemblage or our organization of area studies are quite different because, how are we? We are not, actually I find that, how is our area studies organized? I think we come at a time where many of us are already scholars who are already influenced by SIDE, who are already into post-structuralism. So, we don't have so much of the old classical problem, right? So these are issues, these institutional arrangements. We are also offering undergraduate degrees, master's degree, not just research centers, right? So there are degrees being given, right? So all these are instances of differences institutionally, and autonomous department with their own staff, and so on and so forth. So this is interesting, and also there have been many efforts to revise, rethink Southeast Asian studies within Southeast Asia, and I think the field has been significantly enriched and transformed by the rethinking, by the revisionisms within the region, right, in the past 3 decades or so. And I just named 3 trends, right? One is, I think there's now consciousness, rather than just taking the American origins of area studies, or the European origins, it's now there is better appreciation of that there are other conceptions of Southeast Asia as a region. That the notion of Asia Tenggara, as it is called now, maybe have many different notions. Even within Southeast Asia itself, if we look at within our own countries, our own regions, every region has its own way of understanding territory, or So for instance, here Tongchai Winichaku has this book called Siam Map, a historian of Thai, a famous historian, a good book. He looks at how that in Thailand they use this the Trafung manuscript. The concept of local is is through delineations of temples, of rivers, and all that. And I have to say, my own personal experience is, I don't know why it's north, east, west, south. Always never know. Even you give me compass, also very hard for me to understand. And I always understand by if I know about buildings. Oh, you tell me landmark, I know how to find the place. But you tell me north, west, south, I cannot find. Because we don't have this aerial view. Maybe this aerial view of north, east, west, south, for me, I think maybe is a Western orientation. I don't know whether I'm correct, but my husband very good in finding north. My husband is French, so he knows where. But I cannot, because I don't have, for me, I must know which building next to this building that I can find. Right? Is this, I don't know, but maybe, maybe there's something to think about. But, and then of course you have, our own regional ways of understanding our own territories, our own concept of space. In Bali, you have this whole cosmic balance of the, what's his name? Sang Yang Widi, right? Or the cosmic turtle, right? So, and also, and in Southeast Asia, you have also different notions of Southeast Asia. Here you have the Arab, because in a long time, people are going to Mecca for Hajj. And so the sense of Southeast Asia also you have from Arabia. Yeah, they always call this the people from Java, right? Java was Southeast Asia in a way, right? Yeah, Java, or the Zerbadat, right? The land, the kingdoms below the winds, right? Which refers to this Aceh, Siam, Makassar. So there are different concepts. And so from India, you have the Suvarna Bhumi. Now the airport in Bangkok is called Suvarna Bhumi, right? Right? The lands of gold, right? And so on, yeah? You have the Suvarna Kripa, right? The Isle of Gold, right? And in China, you have also, so maybe the Chinese student can tell me whether this one I get from scholars' work. They say there is a Nan, is it, what's it called? Hainan Tupo, and there's the Nan, there is also the Nanyang, right? And in Japan, they also have, they have the Urananyo, sorry, Soto Nanyo, and then Tona Asia, right? And this concept of Tona Asia even actually according to some scholars who have written, I forgot the name of the scholar, that it was even a concept, Pona Asia, which is Southeast Asia, was used in Japan before World War II. So it does not need to have, so there are all these different origins, which now scholars are a bit more conscious and trying, and some of you want to look at that. What are the origins of Southeast Asia within Indonesia, within China, and so on, right? Now, I think second, there's also been greater awareness that there are different intellectual origins, different genealogies of knowledge, right? While we study Western theories about the region, we should not dismiss Western theories. They are like knowledge. If we dismiss any other knowledge that is established, I think it's to our poverty. I think we should be open-minded people. Even ideas we don't like, we should know them. Then we understand what we don't like. Don't say just don't like, It's become that those kind of things that you think, I don't like this person, though I don't read. No, if you don't like, read and then say why you don't like. That is your job as a scholar, as any human being, as our job, right? I think. So now there are more awareness. So what is Indonesia? What are your local knowledge about the region, right? About Indonesia, right? What are your practices? Yeah, you are starting a new practice of area studies, of Southeast Asian studies. So how? Who are the people and who are the students and that, right? So there's a book that a digital volume I had was an attempt to trace, to map, different practices over time. How the different practices are affected, all influenced by individual scholars, the experience of learning humanity to be a student, and the experience as a scholar as they practice and try to develop knowledge of the region. And I think thirdly, that it's also become stronger that scholars in the region have now confidence and also a commitment to focus on social issues, experiences that are concern of the region that may not be popular anymore in academic discourse. Academic discourse always have trend, like fashion, ada fashion selalu. So we can follow fashion, of course we have to in some way, if not you will see it so old fashion, right? But I think we also have to be strong enough to understand that sometimes even when something is not fashionable, but it's important in the region, to stick to it and study it. Do not be fearful, do not just follow fashion. Follow the social reality and study it, right? So I think there's that commitment now and it's evident. So I think that third, there's four, I forgot. So four, there's also, I think there's like, any kind of frontier of knowledge. I think there's a great potential for Southeast Asia to produce from Southeast Asia, for scholars and students, to produce knowledge that are very important for the world today. Why? Because the region is a region of diversity. We are a region of great diversity. If you talk of migration, which everybody is studying today, of multiculturalism, right? We are very multicultural from our very beginning, even before our nation states were formed. The question, religion, right? Migration. We are the origins of it. In fact, if you look at human DNA, right, from Africa, actually in human DNA, I'm trying to read, also can't find it, but I don't understand. But if somehow they say the DNA in Southeast Asia is more complex and heterogeneous compared to elsewhere, because it's where the beginning of human flow come here. And if you look at DNA content, it's the most dense. So I don't know how. So very interesting. Even DNA, they are different. So if you talk of diversity, we are the place to study diversity, and the problem of diversity in the world today, the cultural clash, people fight over so many things. Then we also see how we fight over so many things, and how we still survive. Right? There are so many fights, and in Indonesia you have so many terrible history, violent history of the past, so much sacrifice. Learn from it, and how can the way you live together, how can the way you live together as friends, as enemies, as whatever, how can we learn? How can the solutions we try to fix forward can be used not for the region but also for the world, for human future? And I think it's very important, right? And the haze is not the burning of why do farmers want to burn? These are the things, yeah. Later I'll come to it. But I think that there's great promise because we are such a region with so many problems. So the problems can be challenging, and you can say on one hand, oh, very depressive. On the other hand, I think there also is a potential for new possibilities, for new ideas. Okay? So next, the third part is the future direction. So we're going with this background. What then should be the future of Southeast Asian studies? You guys will take it further because you are the younger ones, right? So we are young too, but you are younger. Okay? So future directions. What goals should Southeast Asian studies strive for? What goals should they have? I think overall there should be one big goal, and for me, this is very personal, but I think you would share it too. Is that I think what's important as students of the region, people like us who are very interested in Southeast Asia because we live in it and it is part of our life. It is also part of our future. Your future, your children's future, your grandchildren's future, right? So how can Southeast Asian experiences and knowledge contribute to new ethical interventions? Interventions that be for the good, not for the bad. There can be interventions for the bad too. For good interventions, they can contribute to a more equal world, a more inclusive world, and a more sustainable world. Very grand ideas, but I think we should hold on to grand ideas, right? Because don't be stingy. Have to be really hearted and with grand dreams. Yeah, if not what for? We have to think about the future, right? How can human beings and in the world, right? How can we think, because the world is in crisis. I think you all know, look at newspaper every day. You see or you read newspaper, you feel very terrible. I don't know about you guys, but as an older person, I feel really terrible, right? And so we are in a world that is very global. We talk about globalization. Everybody, even the Chinese, Korean, or whatever, all coming to study here. Wow, it never happened 30 years ago. Not happened, but now it's happening. Global, it's true. People are moving all over the world. We are a very diverse world. The world is getting interconnected all the time. But the world is also growing more and more unequal and more separated at one hand. More and more divides. Yeah? And so I think our role as scholars of the region is to see how knowledge of the region can contribute to a better world, to the crisis of the world today. It should be, because we are no longer just citizens of Indonesia or citizens of Southeast Asia. We are also citizens of the world because we are human beings. Human beings should care for the future of human beings, right? So I think that would be the challenge, right? Now, I would think under this broad goal, what are the imperatives, what are the drives, what are the important things that we can think of in terms of the research directions? Would be, I think there are three major ones that cover, and one would be how to identify and overcome the growing powers or the new manifestation of power of national powers, of regional powers, of global powers, and their new hegemonic ambition. What are the new ambitions of the state? There can be good states and there can be terrible states. We all have suffered states. We all voted and elected our governments. But that doesn't mean they serve us, right? So, it's always a battle as we go forward. But it's true, there are new powers consolidating all the time, right? So these powers, how do they manifest and what kind of new ambitions do they want to be? Yeah, so we need to study them, right? And second, study and try to find solutions to that. Second is, I think we need to identify the major sources for the production of social inequalities, right, and cultural differences within the region and between the region and the world. Because I think that the production of social inequalities, it can be in many ways, political, economic, and so on, but also cultural inequality, cultural differences, because people fight over cultural differences, people kill over cultural differences today, right? So we need to identify also the sources for the production of these inequalities and differences, and try then to find solutions. How can these gaps be minimized, right? And there are no magic solutions. Everything, every context, different situations will require different approaches, right? And we can learn from different situations. And I think thirdly, today, I don't know, but I come from Penang, so I have a lot of haze. So the problem is, so I'm not blaming Indonesia, but it's also in Amazon, in Brazil, it's burning. So this issue really clearly environmental and sustainability. And I think Indonesia, many things, many NGOs cleaning up rivers and all that. So we should think about environmental sustainability because it's become a real problem, right? And how come even I go back Penang, I look at, wow, we never clean the river very bad, even the beaches so dirty. And I often feel so, I don't know what I can do. Like how do I tell people, please don't throw rubbish? I'm one older woman and I go after I will get scolded and beaten maybe. But I feel very sad. I look at the picture, people come picnic and they just throw everything. How come we never, how come, how? You know what I mean? And I think that efforts, but these are things that we need to think about because the environment is our future, right? So, now, some are the emergent possibilities. I think there are two, that is, in Southeast Asia, many efforts, NGOs, I think especially a lot of social activities, ordinary people's movement, NGOs, all kinds of things going on informally by people, community level. There have been many efforts to make sure that people can live harmoniously, can have dialogue, yeah, can have collective futures. I call them intercultural outlooks. And also, some scholarships have been working on that. How do we minimize or transcend, yeah, deep animosities, yeah, deep ethno-religious differences, or even economic, I think economy is easier to resolve maybe. It's the deep ethno-religious diversity, differences, where you cannot even stand the other person. You cannot even understand it, you totally cannot compromise. And the idea is just kill them, or isolate them, or throw them away. Cannot, right, human beings, but we tend to do this, right? So, how do we do that, right? Right, and how do we develop intercultural perspective? And how do we intervene? Just now I was coming in the morning, Pak Eka, Ibu Melani's husband was telling me, he wrote a story on the tattoo, men tattoo were killed. People just throw them. In one time in Indonesia, people were tattooed were mysteriously killed because they seem to be criminals or bad people. So it's this concept, right? We don't like them because we think they're criminals, so we just kill them. How come we can have this? How can we develop another way to understand even people we don't like? How? Right? Because so these are the challenges, and I think there are different ways. So it can be writing an essay and become very effective. It can be about many other things. So let's look at ways to overcome this. And I think sustainable and respectful human-environmental relationships very important. And we in South Asia have this. When we were young, and even now, even in Malaysia, when we go anywhere and we believe you cannot pull any tree, you cannot, everything we believe that if you do something, you must say, oh, excuse me, I'm not disturbing you. Because that's a respect of the being of the tree or the, it's a animism, right? So that's this respect of nature, you don't destroy, you only take what you need and all that. How come we lost those culture? How come now we become so greedy? We tear down mountains to build houses and we do all kinds of things. How come we've lost this? How can we revive this? And those that are still existing, how can we continue and make sure that they flourish? Yeah? So these are the things we can look at because every culture have their own traditions, right? Of respecting nature, right? So I think, and then lastly, one and then last is the roles for you guys. What are your roles? Then your roles will be to study and develop directions on the kinds of alternative developments and human progress that are needed for regional societies, right? Okay? And what can be done to improve the economy, to have a fairer society, economic growth, more equal distribution? How? If you become entrepreneur, be good one so that whatever you make money, also don't make money blindly and just take every cent from people. You can be a capitalist, but be a good one that can be ethical. And if a new generation of people wants to make money but can think of ethical trading, fair trade, there are many already, but really the big time people, right? How can capitalism become more equal? Because I think we can't say don't ban capitalism, right? But how can we have an alternative? Education, what's needed in our education system? Malaysia education system, I feel very heartache because very, very terrible. After years of politicizing religion and race, it's just collapsed. You go to school you don't learn anything. What's the point? It's destroyed the education system. So it's very sad. We should not destroy our education. We should improve it. So how can you contribute, right? social welfare, what's needed, right? Medical services. I want to say this example. In Penang Adventist Hospital, where I come from, 80% of the patients are Indonesian. No problem, it makes the hospital very rich and the property. And many people benefit because Indonesians stay there, eat there, and all that. So good business for Penang. But I wonder, how come Indonesians have to go so far for medical services? There's something you have to ask. Why is it you don't have good? Every country should have good services. I'm not saying that Malaysia has, okay? But this is something, these are questions we need to raise. And we need to say there's a problem. If this such a trend exists, there's a problem. And we need to think about it, right? Amenities. Now you're building MRT and LRT after 70 years over independence. Very long time, no? So how come the politician never think about it so long ago? Something is wrong, and how come nobody said anything? The same with Malaysia, yeah. So these are the things we as Rakyat, we have to, it's not to be opposition, but we need to say that this is a problem and we need to. And if any of you want to be a politician, then be someone who can think of the people, right? I think it's good to have good political leaders, so don't think too, it's good to have students who want to be good politicians, right? Okay? So how can better futures be realized? Whose responsibility? Of course, we have a responsibility in whatever we do as scholars, how can we contribute? But who is responsible, right? How can we make this known, right? And how can you be empowered, and Southeast Asian Studies be empowered to achieve this responsibility? And I think one way is to always learn from others, networking, know what people are saying, and then we can develop and enrich our perspective. In conclusion, right? So what we've talked about is that we live in very complex, in very divided and uncertain world, right? And I think in such a context, we need diverse ideas. We need alternative solutions to the crisis of capitalist growth, crisis of cultural conflict, crisis of environmental unsustainability, right? And I think in this context, not just Southeast Asian Studies, but because we are in Southeast Asia, we have our role, and Southeast Asian Studies have, an important role to play. Southeast Asian perspective, right? Become ever more important in that, it can provide another perspective, another intervention, right? In an increasingly unequal and imbalanced world, right? Where it's true. Well, in one way, we are saying, oh, we're so global, we're so diverse, and all that. But actually, despite all this globalization and migration, all that, the world, on the other hand, is becoming more and more narrower. It's defined by big groups of capitalists, right? Google, when we use this, we have no choice. There's so many, I always try to clean my history, but can never clean because Microsoft, so many, how to clean. But we are help captured, we have no other choice, right? How come, right? I'm not saying that it's bad, but I'm just saying it's becoming narrower because more and more, smaller and smaller groups of capitalism, of states, of house elites, and individuals are having more power than the majority in defining the future of the world. So, and I think this is a problem for all of us, and we need to keep on voicing, keep on making the message that all of us have a responsibility. So I see this as one of the future of area studies, or Southeast Asian studies. So I am, and we can have time for discussions for the lecture. So, okay, maybe I let you, Nira.
Thank you very much. We just got a very lot that we can learn from your lecture. So maybe now we just open the discussion. Siapa yang mau ada pertanyaan? Silakan.
Dalam bahasa Indonesia.
Boleh.
Bahasa Inggris. Bahasa Cina. Please don't be shy. It's a class, It's a class. It's a time.
Tanya apa saja boleh. Silakan. Ya, siapa yang mau bertanya? Bisa angkat
Don't be
tangan.
shy because the question you have is an important one.
Maybe I will ask just to warm up.
Yes, Melanie.
Now there is another critique to Southeast Asian studies. Rather than, it's sometimes people consider Southeast Asian studies like a study of congregation of nation states. But people are now critiquing the statism, how to go beyond nation state, and instead look at transnational connection. So for example, in some of our courses, we study border issues, for example, or we study diaspora communities from one country residing in other countries. So these are some of, or in terms of popular culture, we see the, for example, cultural flow from one to another, sometimes also cross-regional. For example, the popularity of K-pop, which is out of Southeast Asia, but in Southeast Asian countries. So what about this kind of trajectories?
Yeah, I think it's a good question. Is it on? Can you hear me? I have no voice. Actually, when I look at the slide on the classical, actually I had one slide which I didn't put in, is that these are the classical, the three, right? But actually the newer trends will be really all these diasporic study, transnational study, Zomia, which is the border in between, So it's already, popular culture and all that. So these are the newer trends, which is trying to dismantle the, as I said, boundedness of the region, right? When we say boundedness of Southeast Asia, it's also, when we study Southeast Asia classically, we also tend to look at countries. And countries, as we know, are already an artificial construct, because the colonial period already divide out the British, the Dutch, the whatever, and then Indonesia came about, Malaysia came about. How Malaysia is cut between Malaysia, the border between Malaysia and Thailand? How? Because the British and the Thai negotiate. The border between Malaysia and Indonesia, the Dutch and English decide. So these are already artificial constructs, right? So the critique of area studies, the revisionism of the area studies have created, I would think, in another slide which I didn't use, was that there's, I think, I would say fourth category, or even more, but the fourth will be everything that transcends, that flows, and everything becomes transnational flows, transborder, so which is no longer within the contentment or the containment of nation states, right? Which we all know is problematic, but at the same time, I also think that we also know that in Southeast Asia, we cannot throw the nation state away, because we, in many Western academic discourses, there's such strong antagonism against any mention of nationalism, any sense of nation state, but actually, we should bear in mind there's a problem with nation state. We all suffer from it. But at the same time, the sense of the nation state is still so powerful in our lives. The sense of nationalism also becomes ever more powerful today. In some countries there's now a kind of right-wing nationalism, right? So I think, as I say, always have this perspective, a dual perspective, or we say the multi-dimensional perspective. Last time we have shampoo, we say, shampoo and conditioner, so two bottles, right? Now you have 2-in-1, even 3-in-1, even coffee also 3-in-1. Have this kind of perspective, that you have, your perspective is campur. So I like to use this, the shampoo or the coffee, 3-in-1. Last time it's different, sugar, no sugar. Shampoo, very good, but now we have 3-in-1, 2-in-1, so this kind of perspective. The ability to hold that when we say something does not mean that there are problems with it, does not mean throw away the baby with the bathwater. That it has a problem, but then try to find out that this is how concepts change. This is how knowledge changes. Then you revise it. Then it becomes a new category, right? Is bread, it's very hard to, I like to use this, not the idea, but I try to, because sometimes we are fixed in our thinking. So I always tell students, if these two pieces of bread, you put jam and butter, they put together, becomes sandwich, is it the same or not? Then you think, yes or no, I don't know, but to me it should be different. So, this idea of changing something, then it's a new concept. Don't think of it as bread and butter, that is one together. So it's a totally new concept already, right? So So it's a very important, and this is in fact the main challenge, and this is also a main critique. Actually, scholars in the region have been doing this now. We do diasporic study. Now, as I said, we do Southeast Asian migration. Southeast Asia, many from Vietnam, Cambodia, they ran away from the war, right? They were where? They're all over the world. They're in Australia, in America, in Europe, and all that. Some even some of Southeast Asians are in Arabia, because they went earlier on when they went to the Hajj. Many of them stay in Saudi Arabia, and they are caught there. They have no citizenship, but they are born there because their parents stayed when they in the turn of the 1920s, 30s. They stayed. I have a student, I have a student who is a colleague in Singapore who does this, and they are very disenfranchised citizens of Saudi Arabia, and they are Muslims. They stayed there because they believe was the Mecca, the center of the world, and they are Southeast Asians from Southeast Asia, largely from Patani, some from Indonesia, from Malaysia. They stay there in the 1900s, and but they have no citizenship. And if they do something wrong, they commit a crime, you know what does? Saudi Arabia sends them home, and they are home to many of them in Thailand. So and they go back, and they are not Thai, but they are in exile. The same with the Cambodians and the Vietnamese in America. If they commit crime, you know what America does? Send them home. And and then now in Cambodia, some of them have become this with lots of tattoos, and they have formed NGOs. They do break dance, and then I teach a course in Cambodia because I have students who go service learning, and so I found these are also all found on the internet, and these are all ex-criminals from America, all full of tattoo, and they form NGOs with doing dancing, break dance, and they work with orphans and street children in Cambodia. And in a way, it becomes educational center for them, to give them hope, and so they also change. So there are all these, the trans-border flows, right? Okay, so other questions?
Thank you. Yang lain? Ada pertanyaan? Yes, silakan.
So my name is Yanti, and I'd like to ask you about can you please give your opinion about how big is the role of our government, the Southeast Asian countries' government, to respond to the rise of the area studies within Southeast Asia itself nowadays, and how do you think the prospect of the role of the big of the what do you call it, the big of the awareness of the Southeast Asian countries' government is in the future for this rise? Thank you.
Okay, I answer first and then so, realistically, all of us are in universities. Here is a national university, and of course we receive funding from our state, and it's good if your state is obviously funding you because you have Southeast Asian studies. But I think that, there should be somehow the Southeast Asian governments tend to think in terms of ASEAN. ASEAN. Yeah, it's nothing wrong, but I think ASEAN is very political motivated. There's a longer, and ASEAN is very within nation state, within the ambitions of the nation state. So ASEAN studies, for me, there's a longer history of Southeast Asian studies, right? So I prefer to be de-linked from political agendas. Of course, we need the state funding, but so I think that governments, they will always have an agenda, like, okay, I give Singapore. Singapore, when I first started 20 years ago, they were not interested in Southeast Asian studies, and I went there when I was doing workshop with Ibu Melanie, and they were doing the book. Nobody listened, and they would think, why you want to go on Southeast Asia? It's useless, It's, no need, and it was very hard for me. I couldn't get funding and had a lot of obstacles because they were not interested in Southeast Asian studies. Now, 5 years later, I think about less than 10 years ago, they started to think that because the foreign consultant, we scholars tell them, but they don't listen, but they go employ money, pay a lot of money to American consultant. American consultant tell them, Asia is important to you, and you should write on Asia. And now Singapore, NUS has something, what center in the center of Asia, or something like that. I forgot even. There's a logo everywhere on the NUS bus, something leading global university centered in Asia. So since then, about 10 years ago, they started to realize, that's why ARI, Asia Research Institute, was set. So always institutions or in NUS is funded by government, but I think governments have their interests. So if they give us funding, good, but we should shape the study as scholars because it's our job, right? So we should not tailor it according to the needs of the state. Of course, sometimes you have no choice, but I think we should always have an input from another perspective, a more open, a more intellectual perspective, and then we can tell them, yes, you can do this, but maybe there's this, how about that and do that. But I think it's important it will be good if, of course, if Southeast Asian governments understand the importance of the region. But how is the interest of the region? I think how is it defined? Again, here scholars need to play a role, because any studies that if you say Orientalism, right? It's not by any state, but it became very much, or if you say Orientalism was something a field that developed from area studies, then I think as scholars we have to contribute and to be able to criticize and to add to perspectives and to the direction. So the direction of the area studies, I'm sure your state doesn't tell you how it is. Some states do, but I think in some sense, I think you have some freedom, right? And sometimes you may have to have some nationalist agenda. All countries will have national education, nothing wrong with that. But I think we as scholars need to always intervene, put in wedges where you can, so that you can always ensure that it is not for some agenda, not for an agenda of a particular group or even for a national agenda. Because it should be about what the region is about. We as students, we are people living in the region, we have to have a perspective that is broader, that is beyond, and I think we should also teach our students to have perspective beyond nation states. It's nothing wrong to be Indonesian, but also realize you cannot be Indonesian today only in the world. You have to be Indonesian and global citizen. It's where you work, you will have to work with other people from other countries, other cultures. So I could say, I don't know if I answer you, but it would be something like that, yeah. I think that's
Tolong disebutkan namanya dulu dan sebagai siapa.
Yeah. Thank you, Professor GOH Beng Lan, for interesting lecture. My name is Nina Elvira. I have some questions for you, but is it alright if I ask you in Indonesian?
Yeah, boleh.
Yeah, I feel more comfortable. Yeah. Mungkin yang lain bisa mengikuti, barangkali ada pertanyaannya. I have two questions. Pertanyaan pertama, tadi Prof menyatakan bahwa perlu ada kesadaran dari insider Southeast Asianis untuk mengembangkan tentang apa itu Asia Tenggara. Tetapi jadi untuk melawan tentang orientalis ide tersebut. Pertanyaan saya, bagaimana untuk menghindari subjektivitas? Karena pengalaman saya sebagai insider Southeast Asianis itu selalu mengatakan, wah Anda terlalu subjektif karena Anda orang dalam. Because you are insider, so I think you are too subjective. For example, I have one issue about my area studies. My focus is Minangkabau. I have one argument. I went to the field work in Minangkabau, and people there told me that our adat is matriarchal, means that women hold the power. I raised that issue. I went to the conference. I went to this discussion about from field work. I got that issue, and I found example of that. But simple, some scholar, outsiders tell me, they don't know exactly what means what matriarchal. Just simple like that. Jadi it's really hard to convince them about what I got from the field work. Jadi dominasi itu sangat kuat sekali, Prof. Bagaimana mengatasi dan dengan selalu dengan kata terlalu subjektif karena Anda orang dalam. Bisakah Anda, Prof, bisa melihat itu supaya kita bisa juga dan banyak insider saya rasa banyak, tetapi selalu dikatakan mereka belum terlalu argumennya cuy, ya macam-macam lah alasannya. Mungkin bisa membantu supaya saya rasa di sini kajiannya banyak yang tertarik dengan kajian Asia Tenggara dan banyak melakukan penelitian, tapi mereka ketakutan karena dianggap terlalu lemah. Terima kasih.
Terima kasih. I just want to confirm matriarchal. She's talking about that. But isn't it accepted that Minangkabau have matrilineality and that is
Just matrilineal.
Yeah, but matriarchal meaning that matriarchal meaning the female has more power.
Yes.
To decide. And your question by that?
Yeah, and I also saw them by that because they saw that according to patriarchy, because Western, for me, in my opinion, to patriarchy. They look at Mina as patriarchal value, so that's the problem, the gap between them. But in reality, in practice, and also the meaning of power, there is a difference between Mina.
Yeah.
If I ask you, come into, okay, sit there. It's not because you have power. I am there have power, but I prefer to sit behind you. That's the difference. It's very hard.
Okay, I understand. Yes, I think Ibu has brought up a very important question and a difficult one. And all of us have this problem as scholars looking at Southeast Asia. From Southeast Asia, you will always be challenged. You're from Southeast Asia, so you are blind. They call, what's the word for it? They call you
Informer?
no, blind. It's like you have you have a blind. No, it's you're biased. You know, there's another word I cannot remember. That you are blind. That you have a biased perspective. You know, because you're local, you're insider. Therefore, your perspective will always be with blinkers. You know, it's like you're blinded. You're blinded. Blinkers. You know, blinkered view. They say. Because you wear certain blinkers, you cannot see, they always say, right? So, and this is, I think, a power relation. Of course, it does not mean that it's not correct, but I always wonder, let's say, you know, when you have a question of, for instance, just the word nationalism, right? In the US or in America, they also have nationalism, but they don't call it that. You know, when they have the American flag, when they have this, you know, they have the right wing. Is that not nationalism? No, they call it patriotism, right? But we are nationalists, yeah. So they're very different. So I think that one problem is, and also, you know, in my work, and always people also never, the Southeast Asian will read my work, but maybe Western scholars say, yeah, this one. Really, when I first when I tried to have it published in American University Press, the first report came. This is but just another Southeast Asian perspective from elite of Southeast Asia. This volume is but just representative of elites trying to voice and recenter Southeast Asian studies. Actually, my topic is called decentering and diversifying. I didn't call it recentering. You know, but they say this one is an elitist perspective only. So, you know, they dismiss anything about insider view they don't like because to them it's a challenge to their view. Actually it's very strange because our volume is about, and I say it can be a different perspective, but I'm saying our different perspective is because there are different priorities and we have to understand these priorities. I'm not saying their views are wrong. I'm saying that we have different and that there should be different voices. But even that, even I read, I have been lucky I don't have bad critique, you know, but there's always within the critique a resentment that it is about, you know, this is about insider. They're always skeptical about this insider perspective. It should not be, you know, but I'm not saying it is an insider. I'm trying to say rather than insider-outsider debate, let's take it away from insider, you're outside, you're inside, because even Southeast Asian can be bad. and you say you're outside, you cannot understand us. That should not be the perspective. That should not be a position for all of us questioning anyone because they're outside and say you're outsider, therefore you cannot understand us. I think that's a cop-out. That's equally a bigoted statement from us, right? But I think that they have here that I think this is a thorny question that will never go away, because when you say it's a different perspective from inside, you already question you. Immediately they think you're biased or you're racist or you're nationalist. Already they map you into, and they cannot understand that this is already not logical scholarship. They immediately have this tendency already, you know. And we should fight about this, and one way to fight is that you have to have good scholarship. You have to back up your finding. You have to just, you know, you have to read what they say, what others say, and then you try to show why yours is different. Why is it you say matriarchal rather than patriarchal? Show evidence. And you know what I mean? You have to make sure you have a very strong argument that can show that they are person. Or maybe it can be also, you know, matriarchal, and it can be, I mean, different regions, different places, right? Mungkin di Malaysia tidak sama dengan di Padang atau, you know. So make sure you I think if you have very strong, you do good work, you know, you do good solid work, that is read and do a good solid study, really have a solid, and whatever you argue, you make sure that you have a good foundation, and you have you know, you have a backup to make your stand. You have like a lawyer, you must want to make an argument. The lawyer very clever, must cover all grounds. The same with academia, you want to make argument, make sure you're a good lawyer, that nobody can put a hole. Once they put a hole, the water can go in and destroy your position, right? So you make sure that you have a well-founded, and then you just continue. It's difficult, but you have to, it's a difficult job, but I think if you continue, and I think today there are already voices. In some sense, I think it's not as difficult. It's not as difficult as before, because now there's space that there's subaltern voices. Even in the crisis of area studies, they are saying, in America, they fight amongst themselves, you know, and then they say, area studies no more use. But to them, some people say, okay, in America, no more use, but let the Asian scholars take it forward. There's also this perspective. But of course, the problem is, sometimes they say, let the Asian scholars take it forward, but with certain rules. If you do your scholarship against what the norms of scholarship is, they will say you are another Asian-centric scholar. You know, this debate has always defined Southeast Asian study, the insider, outsider, from classical, you know, Smale, autonomous history, you know, has always been about, are you watching Southeast Asia from inside Southeast Asia on the land to on the land, or are you watching Southeast Asia from the ship to the land? So different perspective, right? And the critique is the Asian people always do this because they're nationalists, they are influenced by nation state and all that. And it's true as well that such problems lie in Southeast Asian scholarship. There are scholars who do very terrible work. I speak for my country, you know. There are terrible, terrible work that is completely very narrow, and you know, see from where a very narrow perspective, it will never stand any scholarship, any critical look of it. So as scholars, we should have good standards of scholarship, and then they cannot shoot you down. They shoot you a bit, but it cannot completely shoot you down. But I'm not saying, but the volume we did is, it's generally, I don't have very bad critique, but there's always that I know that they don't like this insider, but they cannot shoot down. Because it's strong enough that it can stand there, it's out there. If they reject it, fine. Sometimes they ignore it. A lot of times I read people doing Southeast Asian studies, especially even my colleague from NUS, there are many, they just ignore it because it's too complicated for them to deal with. So they just ignore it. But we as scholars should not ignore any scholarship. If it's a scholarship related to your field, you must engage it. That is your responsibility. That is just an ethic of scholarship, right? So if you want to voice, I think we should do it on very clear grounds. We should also be ethical in our doing. We should not just dismiss Western ideas because they're bad. We should learn from them and then try to show why is it they have a limitation, right? So Ibu, I continue to say that I want to share with you to say you're not alone, because all of us have the same feeling, and sometimes you feel very bad, I want to give up, but don't give up. because you are there, and I think that there are, as insider can have blinkers, of course, and we should be aware of it, but also insider can give you another perspective. Because insider, we know the nuances. We know the nuances of religion, we know the nuances of context, right? And we should continue to be committed and to have confidence, to continue arguing and putting our case up. So the issue of how we put it, our job and our representation, that it becomes a convincing argument for others to read. And if you put out a convincing argument, they may not like it, but the ethical scholars, there are also ethical scholars there, they will not deny it. So you will have all kinds of responses, but I think if you put out a good work with substance, people who are ethical will acknowledge it. It may not be perfect, they will say there are some pitfalls, but it's fine, you know, all of us have pitfalls. But that is how to go forward, not to feel depressed by it, because first to know you're not alone, all of us have the same problem, and to continue improving your work so that it really is out there and that it will be accepted. I think it can be done because these kind of arguments have been put up, and increasingly more and more in today's age, scholarship becomes more and more challenging of Euro-American standards, of normative assumptions. So I think it is not a bad time for us to continue fighting and to put up those voices. Yeah? But I think we should not put up in a challenging way by saying, in a way where we dismiss others. Sometimes some scholars, you know, like to say, oh, this is our perspective, you know, we are correct. Actually, ours is also one perspective. We cannot say our perspective is better or more correct than theirs. We can say that, you know, in this case, but in my study in this, it does not tally with what you say, and I show why.
Thank you, Ibu.
Yeah.
I have some publication, they publish it, but it's because I try to compromise with them. So I'm still use material, but in my articles, I saw them, then I saw that, okay, material society, but in Minangkabau, we need women holding power and so that. So that's a kind of compromise. But I'm still trying to solve. It's not only material. Yes, right.
Yeah, you should continue.
And so that's why they publish my articles.
Yeah, maybe that can be a motivation for you to have a paper, a theoretical paper, to engage how matrimoniality is not necessarily, you know, it can also lead to, it's also part and not just matrilineal, but that Minangkabau society should also be conceived as matriarchal. You know what I mean? So maybe that could become a theoretical challenge for you, and you have to do more greater studies, more stronger data, and also then to engage with what has been said about Minangkabau and patriarchalism, you know? Yeah. So that can become a motivation for you to write a more theoretical paper to challenge the concept, the normative understanding of Minangkabau society.
Fortunately, I'm not the only one, so I just follow, maybe you know that Wazir Dahar. He's also that we should go to the federal and just show them what in daily life. So that's quite my clue.
Yeah.
And not the second one, I also tried to also one about diaspora, the term of diaspora, because they are different according to Minangkabau. But it's really hard, sangat keras sekali untuk bisa masuk. But thank you Ibu for discussion.
Baik, selanjutnya masih ada pertanyaan. Oke, silakan. Ini Chang Kwanan dari LRT.
Ya, oke.
Tahun apa?
What?
Sekarangnya tahun apa? Studennya? Oh, bukan ya. MA, sorry, forgot.
Yeah. Okay. First of all, I thank you very much for your fabulous speech about this topic. And before this topic, I just learned national identity this semester. So I imagine about regional identity in Asia. So I I try to figure out which regional identity could give a very huge influence on or Asian people considered as one community and as one big association. So I try to figure out, because first of all I consider as currency, but it's very difficult to carry on because different countries have different has a big different rates. And the second is about bahasa. Yeah, maybe in Malaysia or Indonesia or Singapore they can speak bahasa Indonesia or Malay, but you consider about the mainland of Southeast Asia, they speak different bahasa and different languages. They're also difficult to speak the same language in this association. And the third is about, I try to figure out. The third is one bahasa, ketiga. The third is
Gender.
maybe gender. So
gender.
yeah. So could you help me to figure out what from your point of view, so which factors or policies can be proceed to give
Asian identity.
Yeah, to consider we as one, Asian communities as one.
First, I want to ask you, why is there a need for an Asian identity?
Yeah.
Why? I ask you one question first.
Because my
Why
major is
from
Southeast Asia study.
But in Southeast Asia, I see. Okay, it's the same actually. So why Southeast Asia? Yeah, it's a good question. Because yeah. So you see, scholars, it's a good question because it's a potential problem. On one hand, we say, okay, why study Southeast Asia, right? Because there is such thing as a region. When we want to say Southeast Asian studies, we believe there's a kind of a regional identity. But at the same time, so this is where the 3-in-1 works, okay? Where the notion of region is there. But at the same time, we should also be aware, and it can be useful sometimes, in this case, like Asian studies, to deflect or as a means to build alternative knowledge, right? Because you have to build a regional kind of concept so that through regional experiences you can then build up a category, a general category that applies to a particular region of the world. So it's a strategy, right? It's a strategy, can be used, but it does not mean that it is unproblematic. Because first of all, what is Asia? Actually, if you look at scholars, is there anyone who is a Southeast Asianese? I don't think so. All of us study different countries. But we can also, of course, study different countries and be aware of the region as a whole, right? If you say Asianese, not true. Asianese means usually they study Japan or China or Korea or Taiwan or whatever, right? So you have one country base, and then you are aware of the region, right? So what is Asian identity? It will be very difficult, I think, because first, if I look at Asia, Japanese will think that Japanese always think they're not Asia. Anyway, they are the only Asian country with colonial power. To the Japanese, they are not Asia. They are different from Asian. But in some way, they are also Asian. But in some way, they think I think Japanese think they're more connected to the West, really. The deep Japanese thinking is that, because they always think themselves separate from Asia. So the idea of an Asian identity, of course, it can be used strategically in the sense of scholarship to build inter-Asian studies. But to have a sense of a regional identity, even there's first, we all think in terms of nation state. On one hand, it is problematic, as I said, we should think beyond nation state. But on one hand, we cannot help it. We all have passport, no? Go anywhere, must hold your passport. And so we are also, but to have an Asian identity can be good and bad also. So to have Asian identity in all identity construction is political. Which one will be the dominant one? And I just give an example of Asian studies in Singapore, right? There's a trend towards Asian studies in the last 5 years in Singapore. And for us, many Southeast Asian studies people, we don't like it because we feel, oh, Asian studies means we'll be drunk by Japanese studies, Chinese studies, and Indian and South Asian studies because the bigger fields is like the derivative tradition again, you know? So there's always levels of politics because, you know, and is it, so at one level, and scholars use it also, this Asian revival, you know, revival of Asianism, Redux, Asia Redux. Prasanjit Dwara wrote an article on Asia Redux in the Journal of Asian Studies a few years ago about, it's very much in this spirit that Asia can offer different perspectives and all that. And he has his detractors, people so angry with him. This is another one talking about Asia, and those are sympathetic, right? So it's always, I think, it's a strategic use for us to find ways to talk about alternative, because when you want to talk about alternative, it's very hard, you know, because it's like the air we breathe. We breathe in, we never even think about it. We take for granted. It's like the blackboard. If there's a white black dot, we see the black dot, but we forgot about the whiteboard at the back, which is the background. You know, it's this kind, so it's very hard to think of alternatives. So you have to find certain ways to be able to take up what is different, to show this is different. So Asia becomes a strategic identification. But I think that in any way, why want to construct Asian identity can also become a hegemony, right? You remember Japan uses what we call co-Asia, co-prosperity identity as a way of domination. So I would also question that the rise of Asia can also be, perilous. It's not just, I'm talking about possibility, but the rise of Asia can also be a danger. It means what? So first I would think, and this is China. The elephant in the room is everyone in Asia very scared of China. That's why it's very good that you are in Southeast Asia. Indonesia, learn Indonesian language, that you can help, because I know in China you also have different discourses, and you also have your progressive scholars who intervene and all that. So every identity is problematic for me. Even good ones can be dangerous, you know, because it can be used in different ways. So to have an Asian identity also can be, of course it's there because it's like American, Asian American, they have it because they want to differentiate themselves from Americans, right? From African Americans and all that. So it is an identity, it is a political thing. So if there is an Asian identity, it can be useful if you want to make a stand, Asian countries come together, make a stand. Yeah, but I think that I will not see a need to work towards an Asian. I think comparatively learning from each other is useful, right? Learning to have a wider perspective. At the same time, if you have this perspective, Asia and the rest of the world, you are also creating a divide, which is also dangerous. Because if you look at the world today, the Muslim versus the non-Muslim, or the Muslim versus the West, it's another category. And it's also dangerous, like a Muslim identity, an Islamic identity can be also dangerous, you know? And so if you are, so I'm not saying it's bad, but always see the complexity, and see strategic use at different times. So I would think there's no need to construct an Asian identity, but it's good to learn because it's so neglected. Asian countries are always, for me, I think, for our generation, we have always looked to the West. We never look at Asia, you know? For dominant countries, we never look at Asia. We always look at the West. Even, you know, when we want to learn something, it's only in the last, I think, I don't know, maybe last 30, 40 years that suddenly people start. You know, Malaysia had look east, but look east means look Japan, and Japan means also look west, I think. You know, but it's a way it also works to divert the attention. So I think there is now more and more discourse of alternative. But I also, and when I look at the Islamic discourse, you know, Islam as an alternative, you know, with Iranian revolution, is an alternative, a critique of Western capitalist growth. And given the Iranian history, where the Shah and before that were very pro-West, and all Islamic influences, Islamic whatever, was suppressed. And that's why there was a revolt, and Islam came in against the oppression of the past, you know. And it's, in a way, it's an alternative modernity. But look at what Islam has become today. Even in Indonesia, it's not Islam but political Islam. It can be used for political purposes. I think religion is not. Religion should be about self-knowledge and knowledge about the world. Religion should make us humble, you know, should make us question ourselves. But what has religion become? So it is equally dangerous. I think it can become dangerous, right? But I can also understand that it is also useful and strategic sometimes, right? So while Islam as an alternative to Western modernity, I think it had a very good origins, and the Iranian Revolution was inspiring to many countries, to Malaysia, to many other countries. But then Islam became a global politics and becomes very complicated, right? And then you see different strengths, and then becomes such a, you know, the kind of I think the terrorist, the whole idea of Islam versus another culture, the civilization and discourse, is also problematic. So every identity we have to be careful, because we are never one identity. Are you one? You're not. You're our son. You are maybe boyfriend. You're a student. You're so many identities, right? You're half Indonesian, half Chinese now, maybe. So we are never one. We are very complex being, and I think it is always important. Where on one hand, we have to have an identity to tell people who we are. On the other hand, we should also always be aware that we have many influences. And when we see that, we can see that we and other people are interrelated. That we are not, you know, we are different from people, but I think it's quite important to see the self and others are not so cut, because what others are, that we are part of others. When we know others, we change, right? When we you know, so I think we are very complex, and it is quite important to see that. So I'm trying to say nuance. The 3-1, have complex identity, know when it's useful, when it's useless, when it's very good, when it's very dangerous also, right? To have this kind of perspective.
Yeah, thanks for your explanation.
Masih ada sekitar 10 menit.
Ini ada pertanyaan.
Oke, silakan.
Sila, jangan malu.
Dalam bahasa Indonesia tidak apa-apa. Tidak apa-apa.
Bahasa Indonesia.
Bahasa Indonesia saja. Tidak apa-apa.
You are all master student, right? So master student, you have a
Undergraduate.
Huh?
Undergraduate.
Oh, undergraduate too.
Yeah.
Yeah, of course, please. Sila.
Ya udah. Tidak apa-apa.
Ya, itu Dani.
Ya.
Now Shadani, our lecturer also from French studies program.
Okay, I don't want to ask a question, just want to ask for suggestion, because I'm thinking about the future of our South Asian Studies at university. Since we've been around for 2 years only, so we're just newcomers. So what would be your suggestion to attract more people, to convince people to join this study? It's not easy at the beginning. So what would be your advice or suggestion?
I mean, I think it's a very good enterprise, right? I think that, you know, it's high time. UE has a Southeast Asian Studies. EP has area studies, in which Southeast Asia is one. So I think you should do your effort to recruit as you grow, and all of you are ambassadors. You have your foreign students, your local students. Semua orang lokal dari Indonesia ni, dari Jakarta. MA student kan dari different region kan. So it's your role now to be ambassadors. You have juniors, you have to tell them ini program yang bagus, datang, yeah, you know what I mean? And even as you grow and you work, then you become ambassadors. So you grow. So but you have also to start promoting, maybe, you know, as a department, you can promote internally within the region, within Indonesia, right? To talk about that you have a Southeast. I think UGM has a Southeast Asian Studies. It's Is that master's or undergrad? Undergrad.
Center.
Center, but they don't have a degree.
They have a Mahidol, but some not Southeast Asian.
Masters,
No.
Yeah. So you have so I think that there's a lot of potential because when I'm in Singapore, many Indonesians always write me want to go and do an MA. You know, in Singapore, and some would come, but then many, of course, Singapore, because the scholarship very difficult to get. So why don't you come here? What was, you know, actually, you know, this is also a problem, you know, we Southeast Asians always want to go to another country. There's nothing wrong to do your degree in your own country, you know, nothing wrong. Because as a scholar, how you become, I did my first degree in Malaysia, but I think it's good also to study overseas. Don't study in one place. Study different places because you learn. So going overseas is not bad, but it's not necessary because, I mean, if you can't, then never mind, just do it here. And then grow as a scholar because you do masters, you boleh buat PhD overseas, you know, but masters, I think very fine to do in Indonesia because realistically sekarang, very hard to get scholarship for masters, anywhere. Even Singapore tak ada untuk orang asing, hanya untuk Singaporean saja masters. You know, PhD can, but also very few now. But for masters, completely no scholarship for foreigners. You know, so masters is a good program for Indonesians to come. You have very good scholars here, so it's very important you advertise, you know, and you think about your program. But I think it has great potential because many Indonesians, I don't know from when I'm in Singapore, very interested in Southeast Asians. There are many applicants every year. So if you become an established place, people will come to study, and then they can go on and do masters, PhD everywhere. Now you have degree, scholarship, all that, right? So you come here, get good training, and then from there you go and do PhD elsewhere. So I think it's good, and I think you also should do promotion. There's some Chinese students, you ask them why they come here. You know, your Chinese student, later we can talk to them, why you apply to UI. And then you find out, and then you network from where they are from. You know, Yunnan, all the Minnan universities in the Minnan area, the south are the first starting point because they have already awareness of Southeast Asia. You start from there, but it does not mean that students from Beijing or from good universities out there will not also, they are, because I think China now they have scholarship. So I think that it's a matter of knowing where to start, having contact, building networks. One way is to build network with some universities, then you have exchange. You have exchange program, from there you start awareness and students will come. So there are different methods, but it can be done, and I think UI is, you know, you are very high in the ASEAN. I just came, don't know, the other day, I don't know who showed me, or was I looked in the internet or something. UI is one of the top, like in ASEAN, Singapore, but UI is very high, you know, compared to many Malaysian universities, all below. But UI is quite good, it's the top 5 or within that. So you are in good standing, you know, you are in good standing. So I don't see, I see every reason why you can expand to become a Southeast Asian Study Center. You can do also summer school, you know, you can do summer school is a good way to attract students from foreign countries. You can have short 2 weeks summer school. And then there also then you say I have a master's program, then you will have people coming.
Ini ada satu pertanyaan, ada satu.
Ya, silakan.
I'm Realita Priyanini. I'm an undergraduate student of Russian Studies.
Oh, very
and I study Southeast Asian Studies in Indonesia, and with that being said, we who study Southeast Asian study in Indonesia is considered insiders. And my question is that I want to know how Southeast Asian study is in the Western countries and the development of Southeast Asian study in the Western countries. That is all from me. Thank you.
How Southeast Asian studies
In Western country.
in Western country, right? Well, I explained a little bit on the origins, and I think in the sense, I think now in America they have, like in Cornell they have masters, right, in Southeast Asian studies. Do they have undergrad?
No.
They don't have, right? So they also have largely, Southeast Asian studies very much research centers, so there are scholars who work, but students who say I'm an anthropology student doing PhD anthropology, I may work in Southeast Asia, then I will go to the Southeast Asian Center or something like that, right? So, and of course there in the West, but not necessarily so, they have of course, in the olden days, I think many Southeast Asian, like all your old generation scholar, yeah, Pak Taufik, Pak Lapian also overseas, kan? They all study in the West, right? So we Southeast Asians were studying in the centers of Southeast Asian before, right? Including, of course, the Western scholars, right? So it's a case where Western scholars, because they're West, they can study the region, any country, there's no question. But Southeast Asian scholars then, of course, the issue of insider, as Ibu has mentioned, has always been there, right? The issue of in the old days, Mail has talked about it, is very worried that these Southeast Asian students doing PhD will become nationalists, So he said, don't become like this. You cannot follow nativist scholarship. He said, don't follow local scholarship. You must do objective social science. Even though he is very sympathetic to finding an Asian-centric view, or not Asian-centric, kind of local view, he criticizes Asian-centric view versus, he also is critical of Western-centric view, but he says the best view is a local view. But he also, in his idea of trying to find the local view, Asian scholars must also use Western methodology and perspective. But of course, he was saying this long time ago when there was no critique of Orientalism or that, because he believed Western social science was the most objective, was the universal, the standard. But of course, those days are over now. We have questioned that because we now know that those perspective and methodologies may be problematic, right? It's more challenged now. But I think it hasn't gone completely, where many times, even today, the revision of area studies, if you do something like you want to talk, maybe now even alternative logics is a bit accepted, but many scholars, like people like Chen Guanqing or Prasanjit Dwara's work, or anyone who does doesn't mean they're not criticized. I said the Asia Redux article in Journal Asian Studies, you can see, very divided. People who are sympathetic, but people are totally against it and say this is another Asia, centric, another Asian vision, another Asian hegemony, right? So those divides will always be there. So in the West today, I think area studies is no longer, Southeast Asian studies at least, is not so strong anymore. Cornell, but Cornell is all the people, Van Anderson, Pak Van Anderson, he passed away. But the old strong men are all either retired or they died, and the new ones are very, very young, and I think they are not doing well. Wisconsin, there's Berkeley, so it's not doing very well. There's some people in Arizona, there's Illinois, northern Illinois. So there are not many centers now. It's not as, because actually area studies is so dismissed, it's so debunked as obsolete and Orientalist or nationalist, So they can only have, because they in fact recently if you look at certain debates, not just Chow Edward, but many of these, this guy who wrote with Harutonian, what's his name, Sakai, is that something now, Sakai, I forgot his name. He has a debate again, recently only, in the position, they really debunk area studies as so bad, so obsolete. But actually, and they hate it so much because they think it's so bad, so orientalist, so conservative. But actually, they are so myopic because they only can see the origins of area studies and its practice in the American sense. They don't know that outside the West, there are other practices. And that for us, in many ways, we are beginning to speak. So if you throw away area studies and say it's useless, you are robbing a voice when the region are just using area studies as a voice to speak. So we have to clarify and to make known that there are these positions and there are these other experiences. If you don't speak, then the voice, the definition become very strong. But sometimes you speak, it does not mean that people have not spoken. There will be many critiques, many responses to this kind of perspective. But it seems they continue because this Sakai, I forgot his name, but he has continued, he has been writing this critique of Asia for so long. What's the name?
Minako Sakai?
No, not Minako. This guy is American. He's based in America, and he's writing on Asia. Forgot the name. I will find the name. is a man, and is a very good scholar, but he's so against area studies, and he's a progressive critical scholar. But to him, area studies is a dinosaur. Because his idea, because it's true in America, the area studies are dinosaurs. And these dinosaurs are very big and very egoistic. They don't want anybody to talk because area studies is theirs. You cannot speak about it. So he's writing against these people. But he forgot that these people are not everyone of area studies. There are other people. So the same with us, we must also remember that, in every form there are always differences. So when they attack area studies as a dinosaur, it's the American experience, but they forgot there are other experiences outside. So for us, what's our role? We have to write about it and tell. But unfortunately, sometimes you write also, they never read. So it's continue on, So when I was in Kyoto, there were many scholars who talked to me about his article, And I said, yeah, I know, they were very angry too. But I read and I was very angry too, but then I was not so angry anymore because he has been writing the same thing, and I said, he has not changed. Actually, in the early work that he did with Hamiltonian, there have been people who criticized and told him it's good, but there are these. But obviously, he never read the critique. You know what I mean? Because it's not changed. Because he doesn't understand this is an American experience. It's not a universal experience, right? Right? So there are these. I hope I'm answering your question because I'm going all over the place. But it's a good question. So I think everywhere is changing. But I think in the West, area studies is now seen as so obsolete. They're now going to many kinds. Actually, cultural studies is quite flourishing. But there are many people who also do global studies, global diversity, all kinds of international studies. There are many transnational studies. Then it doesn't matter. We don't have to be angry. It's okay. As scholars, we cannot dominate, and it does not matter in those. But if we have this field, and I think there's no need to throw away some sessions like this. We continue, and we come up with ideas, and we make a good product, and then people will take us. We cannot stop the world from changing. We cannot stop different perspectives. No need, because if you will have been very upset for the rest of your life. Just accept them, let them be, but you be committed to your field, and you produce good scholarship, and then they will listen to you. It's hard, but it can happen. Even if you do small, it will happen, like small drops in the ocean. Zen, the Zen, the Japanese poem say, one drop in the pond, and it spreads, So then after that, no more. But never mind, it did make a ripple. And then someday, historically, people remember the ripple. So that's how things work, I think.
Okay, okay, thank you very much, Professor GOH Beng Lan. And I think it's already 4 o'clock, so we can close the discussion. Thank you very much. Yeah, of course. If you have like hari Rabu, bisa, ya. Jumat juga ada.
Rabu apa acaranya Bu?
Rabu.